Is it true that it is like heaven on earth, heaven on sea? Let's find out as I tell you my experiences during this sailing. Making an honest review is super important for two reasons. One, it gives you the real feedback on what to expect. And two, if it is honest and constructive, maybe the company will improve on some of the things we mentioned that are not so positive or really negative. And I already benefited from some reviews made in the past that improved the Haven. It started in rough waters or rough land, however you want to say, with the embarkation process. I had an expectation that we would have somewhere to drop the luggage and go straight to the ship somehow, but unfortunately it was not so. But we have to be honest, one sailing doesn't make the full experience on what Haven is like in every single sailing. I've got some experience in other ship within a ship concepts, and even with the same brand, it is not a consistent experience as it goes through the different ships and the different ports. It took me roughly, half an hour to 45 minutes to drop the luggage, and I was expecting this to be a little bit smoother. After security check, then we had a host of Haven that would take us through all the lines, through all the mazes at the embarkation port. So we passed all these waiting passengers and we were able to get to the Haven check-in counter. There I did the check-in and got my sea pass. And waited then in this small area that was for the Haven guests. I must confess I was a bit surprised because the area was packed. There were a few people from the ship attending, giving some refreshment and some quick bites. And yeah, I must say, the quick bites, they were really, really good. The quality of those little sandwiches, that finger food, was, I would say, above average to what I experienced on other environments. And we could have a drink and whatever we needed to make the most comfortable stay as we were waiting to get onto the ship. At a certain moment in time, the chief concierge came to the room and gave some orientation as to what the process. Regarding information, it was nice. So we were receiving that information as to what was happening. I was expecting that piece of information to be a little bit more in a private way, but it was for the full Haven at the same time. So probably a way to optimize time since they had already this delayed embarkation. After that orientation, at a certain moment in time, people that wanted to do the photograph, they would go to the area to do the photograph taken with the background of the ship. And then getting back to that waiting area, and that from that waiting area go to the ship. That process then was quite fast. I must confess I was super impressed because as we then got onto the ship, immediately we could scan the cards, the sea cards, to have the master drill station physically understood where it is and get the master drill out of the way. I'm just not sure with all that speed that we got that I figured out where my master station was in fact. Very fast to the Haven. They took us to the Havens through lifts that were usually for crew only, so we could bypass those queues and not get stumbled upon everybody else. And when we got out, we were already in the Haven area. This is the inclusive area that non-Haven guests don't have access to. Once in the Haven, a thing I was not expecting is a repetition of what happened in the waiting area. All announcements were made with the people gathered in the Haven area, either by the concierge or by the Horizon lounge, and just make the public announcements so that they didn't have to repeat themselves 20, 30, 40 times. Now the rooms in the Haven, they were much better than the rooms out of the Haven, so more space. I had a dedicated butler. Well, a butler was for the row of the rooms and the room attendant, probably 7, 8 cabins. The room attendant amplified the experience that you have on the other side of the ship. So you have more than one turn down of the room. The room attendant was always available whenever we needed. If we said we needed something to be taken care of, he immediately will taken care. So exemplary service. And that is a good thing. Particularly if you're traveling with a family and you have kids, you want the room tidy up frequently, unlike non-Haven areas where you only get once per day. The butler, I found a little bit surprising. My butler was impeccable. She helped a lot, particularly with the coffees. But I find surprising is that the butler, I immediately asked what can I expect of the butler, and basically it's everything to support us in the room. So they don't do the service extending out of the room, like getting us to restaurants or getting us to the theater. That doesn't happen. That happens. We do have some help, and I'll talk to you later on. But the butler is only dedicated to what assistance you need within your room. The Haven has a dedicated restaurant, which I will tell you, the food quality is superb. It is something really special. And I would say to the point that you can avoid some of the restaurants of the specialty dining because the quality is relatively higher. Take one example of a restaurant that is very typical, the Steaks, which is Cagney's. If you are staying in the Haven, don't book a reservation for Cagney's. It's just not worth either the voucher or the money. The food you have at the Haven restaurant surpasses that. And even some other restaurants, take for example, you have a video of all my experience with the Haven restaurant, but just as another highlight, even for example, the steak tartare that you had on the Haven is way better than the steak tartare you have, for example, on Le Bistro. Okay, another specialty restaurant. So I would recommend understand what it is that you have to then select adequately the specialty restaurants. And as I mentioned, I already had benefited from the reviews of previous YouTubers. And that benefit has to do with exactly the food on the Haven. It was amazing, don't get me wrong, fantastic. But the benefit extra I got, and it was during the sailing, because the first days of the sailing, it did not happen. It only happened 4 or 5 days into the sailing. And that was to create a special of the day option. Before it didn't exist, you just had the flat menu. Now you have the flat menu, and then for lunch and dinner, you have a special option of an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. How cool is that? See, giving an honest feedback and review allows the company to improve its service. And I really hope that Norwegian improves the service because the Haven is really amazing. The installations are phenomenal. Within the concierge, there are usually 2 people in the concierge. I did find surprising, they only operate from 8 to 8, so only 12 hours a day, where that service of the concierge is available. It isn't available out of that time window. You have the concierge that I find was super helpful compared to if you are not on the Haven area, you have to go to guest relations or guest services, huge queues and so on. So yeah, having this dedicated person, you can solve your problems much faster. If you have problems. You had also another person supporting the concierge for booking restaurants. There, I must confess, I did not find helpful. Because in the end of the day, what I'm noticing is with the Norwegian, the reservation of the tables is quite less or limited compared to the actual capacity of the restaurant. I didn't see any effort to go and find the real adequate slots. I ended up just go to the restaurant at the moment you want. There'll always be space available. At least that has been my experience with any sailing with Norwegian. That service within the concierge, I didn't feel to be very helpful as I find on other ship within the ship concepts where they will try really to make sure that you get that reservation. Well, in other ships, even the butler helps you with that, getting all those bookings. Haven guests have the private areas, and this allows for a bigger solitude or to have moments that you are escaping that quantity, that bubbling of people around the ship. And that provides that moment of silence. You also have the deck to get the sun private with some jacuzzis there, which allows a better ratio of passenger to jacuzzi or body of water. Fantastic, great experience. You have good views. People that smoke have a dedicated area to be able to smoke. So you got in general, everything you need. I did miss on the entertainment. Inside the Haven area, the most entertainment you get is at the bar. Probably at the end of the day, where all other bars are closed, the bar at the Haven is still open and you get some more drinks. But I do feel that the bartenders, they are there making the effort to keep up with you during the night, and at a certain moment we notice that they are there just waiting for us to finish our drinks so that they go for a night rest sleep. So the passengers tended to release the bartender to be able to go to have his rest, or else it would be punishing him. The Haven guests also have access to the theater. They do get like an escort, like we are all waiting at the Haven Concierge when we want to go to the theater, and then there will be a person that will escort us to the theater where we'll have reserved seating. And the reserved seatings are actually quite good. On the downside is not many shows happen at the theater. Basically, I had one production show in 2 weeks, which is definitely very, very, very low. But that's not a Haven problem, that's a Norwegian problem. I think is Haven amplifies a lot of what Norwegian offers. So the good gets better, the ugly gets worse. So they fill the night in the theater with other bits and pieces of shows. So there was a couple of days that they would have the comedians that were usually in that smaller venue of the comedian doing that show for everybody at the main theater. You would have the Beatles band, the same thing. The show and the usage of the theater I felt a little bit low, but once again, that's not a Haven problem, that's a Norwegian in general problem. Another good thing with the Haven was if you have shore excursions booked with Norwegian, what happens here is you wait for your excursion at the concierge, at that area, where then the concierge will call you out and they'll escort you to the buses directly from within those private lifts, the same that we used on Embarkation. So we use those throughout all the sailing, those internal elevators, to get us to the gangway and out into the buses. And the Haven guests will be the first one to board the buses of their different shore excursions. So that is good. You get to get probably the front seats or whatever seats you prefer within the bus. And when we return from the excursions, you will see somebody holding a Haven sign, and then you can request his escort, and they will take you through those internal lifts without going through the generic lifts direct to the Haven environment. And that makes it very speedy, very accessible, and enhances your experience, reducing waiting time. So that is really something extremely, extremely good. And talking about that priority, the same thing happens if there are tender ports, when you need to go to the ports through a tender boat as opposed to go through the gangway. And those like the same way. So if you are in a shore excursions, they will take you, put on the tender, and you go straight to shore. But even if you are not on excursion, you can piggyback on any of the moments they go to the shore excursions and just get to you on land. So if you have a private shore excursion operator, you'll be able to get to those quite fast. Now, if it is a private just for you, that will be awesome. If it's not private for you, you'll have to wait for everybody else that is on the same excursion to be able to fill it up or get all the guests waited. So it does allow a lot of that flexibility, which I enjoyed a lot. The breakfast in the Haven was fantastic because they have one counter where they do some self-service, or we can self-service, get some salmon, earring, some yogurt, some fruit. That is very fast, that we can immediately start eating. And you have, besides that, the menu for specialities, like, I want eggs Benedict, or I want eggs on one side, or I want some bacon, or I want some French toast, or whatever. So you have that extra menu that you get those extra items, but having that area of the self-service, I do think it improves a lot. Now, talking about self-service, the thing I noticed with Haven as compared to other ship within a ships, it's very, very self-service oriented. I think this comes with a team that I've showed already in my past videos. about the reduction of personnel or efficiency of the personnel on board the ships. So a lot of places you go for self-service, even things like coffee. So coffee is where I got very disappointed. I was expecting a barista with a proper espresso machine. No, they just have those self-grinding, the same as you have at airports or whatever. You click, you will select the type of drink, espresso or cappuccino or whatever, and it makes that automated thing for you to drink. I was expecting that to be a little bit on the upscale, but no, the experience was really not that interesting. But it goes into all this theme of the self-service. If you want snacks throughout the day, you'll have certain time slots where there is one lounge, that is a very quiet lounge, is the Horizon Lounge. Was very good, for example, on the day of the Panama Canal crossing, because from that lounge you could have a fantastic view of what's happening, of the canal and all those operations and of that sailings through the artificial lake. Very beautiful. So I imagine it is also something that would be very precious in an Alaska cruise to be there, or in South America, like the glaciers that you find in South America as well. So I presume that lounge would be good for that. Besides this, I was not expecting the lounge to be basically dead. There was no music playing, there was no bar service there, so it felt a little bit awkward, all that space kind of not being used properly. And the central area where the people ended up talking more was by the bar, by the concierge. But of course, this will depend on the layout of each ship. I would like to experience also the other ships to understand how different of an impact it makes. For example, one thing that is obvious was well designed or well thought out was the courtyard where they have the swimming pool, because that swimming pool is beneficial both in winter or cold weather, where they have the ceiling to protect us from the bad weather outside, and in when it's hot weather, because they can open the ceiling and you get a nice day. So that pool has that double function, and it works only for the passengers of the Haven, which allows you to get access always to a swimming pool, as opposed to when you see on the other areas where you have basically just two swimming pools for everybody on the ship, everybody else on the ship. Now, there were areas that Haven guests could not get into. One example is the Vibe Beach. In other ship-within ships, this concept is tied with some kind of like middle class of the ship. Over here, it is a paid option, so that's probably why they don't want anybody there that didn't pay for it. So that was one area that the Haven guests don't have access to. But in reality, they don't need, because the Haven area, they have their own sundeck, and that own sundeck offers all the amenities that you would find on the Vibe Beach. I find surprising that the Haven guests don't have any special access to the spa. So the access to the spa is just like any regular guests. You pay, you have the same values. Overall, the Haven will give you a superior experience on the Norwegian ships, particularly on the Norwegian Joy, but at a premium cost. Now, is that worth it or not? It's up to you. For me, it's kind of like somewhere in there. But if you want that extra solitude, that little bit more pampering, then Haven is for you. Basically, there are three things in the end of the day that I believe that Haven could improve, or Norwegian could improve the Haven service. One is get a drop-out luggage at the very beginning of the cruise. And two is on that lounge they have there, the Horizon Lounge. I don't know how it is in other ships. Probably have a little bit of entertainment and a little bit of bar service. And number four, very important, get better coffee, please. I'm not going to elongate myself throughout this review, but I just wanted to point out these big items, because I've got many small videos that you can check to see the individual points, and check them over here. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do subscribe to the channel, and let's see what we have in future coming up.